Okay, question for you. What would you say are the top 5 things you learned in middle school or even high school for that matter? Now, I don't know about you guys, but my personal answers were really just these two. Number 1, how to cheat without getting caught. And number 2, how not to talk to girls. But I'm sure like many of you, I sat at my desk during my school years wondering why we weren't being taught the things that really mattered. You know, stuff like investing our money wisely, learning to think for ourselves, common sense, taxes, and of course, what gender I want to be. And look, I get it. There are things that are just meant to be taught in the home. I mean, I wish we lived in a world where all kids had both sets of parents in the home and are being taught the essentials. Taxes arguably being one of the biggest. And yes, there's the fact that our government doesn't want us learning about the tax code, because if we did, well, we would all own cash flowing rental properties and pay less taxes, meaning less revenue for the IRS. Come on, guys. Our politicians have to have something to steal, right? Don't you want them to be happy? Gosh, Nick, what's wrong with these people?
I don't know, man.
But all jokes aside, about 4 months ago, I started going down a rabbit hole trying to figure out why some of the most important things are currently not being taught in school. I mean, imagine if they had classes in high school on topics such as personal development, leadership, proper communication, financial management, along with so much more beneficial things as opposed to like critical race theory or 1940s Southeastern Greek women's studies. I would argue our country would be in a much better position. But as I continued to dig further into the history of our education system, the more I learned about why channels like ours need to continue to do what we do, which is to reveal truths that pertain to our freedoms as the people. So in this video, we're gonna break down the nasty truth behind our education system, how it happened, who's pulling the levers behind the scenes, and I'm gonna do it all in less than 7 minutes. Oh, by the way, real quick guys, before I start the timer, early in this video, I mentioned how you can decrease the amount of taxes by acquiring cash flowing rental properties. Well, there's multiple ways you can do that. But if you'd like more information, check out the description below. Okay, clock starts now. So if we want to talk about the modern education system here in the US, we have to go to the beginning of the 19th century. During a time when the progressive era was in full force, our nation's population grew by a whopping 21% due to immigration, and places like Arizona and Oklahoma weren't even states yet. But the biggest shift in our country was primarily in the economy. You see, this was a time when the US was now pretty established as a global economic superpower, with industries like the auto, oil, steel, and banking industry leading the charge. And these industries were spearheaded by men such as Andrew Carnegie, William Vanderbilt, JP Morgan, and this guy right here, John D. Rockefeller. Now, to say this guy was rich is a bit of an understatement, as he was the richest man in the world pretty much during this entire era. In fact, the Rockefeller family today has an estimated net worth of $360 billion. And John D. Rockefeller, the OG of the Rockefeller family, was pretty much the Bill Gates of that time. And I use that name intentionally, as Rockefeller is really the primary reason as to why our education system is the way it is today. And oh, by the way, have I mentioned that he was also one of the primary forces behind the creation of the Federal Reserve? But maybe that's a story for another time. I mean, one of this guy's most memorable quotes is, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." So how did he make this come true? Because I think it's pretty safe to say that most people nowadays aren't really thinkers. They're kind of just going with what they're told, especially if you consider the fact that our education system rewards compliance and memorization as opposed to original thinking. Well, it all started in 1902 when John D. Rockefeller created the General Board of Education. And this wasn't just some Mickey Mouse club he set up with his friends. It was a private organization that actually got incorporated by Congress a year later on January 12th, 1903. And John D. Rockefeller himself donated to the General Education Board approximately $250 million, which equals today about $7.5 billion. And you know what? It worked. It contributed to many advancements in farming, but more importantly, it introduced a public school system to the United States for the very first time. And well, this is where things get really good, because here is where the story really starts turning south and how we got to where we are today, which leads us to chapter 2. Okay, so I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, Daniel, the General Education Board sounds like a good thing and makes this Rockefeller guy seems like a hero. And to the regular Joe Schmo, yes. But if you take a closer look at what Rockefeller and his friends did, you can see that as money was continuing to be invested into education, more and more they started controlling and influencing what was being taught in these schools for the purpose of their benefit. And one of those benefits was profit. In fact, this is Frederick T. Gates. He was arguably the most influential member of the General Education Board right below Rockefeller. He actually wrote a book titled The Country School of Tomorrow, and a direct quote from the book reads, "Their knowledge of seed selection and cotton culture, if universally applied, would double the cotton crop and bring to the cotton raiser at the very least 240 million added profits annually." Which, by the way, anyone want to take a guess at who the cotton raisers are? Yeah, the industrial elitists of the time. Them. And who were the victims of this operation that they were taking advantage of? Yeah, the poor farmers and the African American community that was supposed to be freed 40 years ago. But of course, it doesn't stop with just profits, because the true intentions for Rockefeller and Gates wasn't just to make money off of this, but instead their main objective was simple: ensure they maintain lordship over the masses and continue to print mindless factory workers that would continue to work for them without questioning a thing. In fact, here's another quote from Gates in his book. "In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple as well as very beautiful one: to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are." As in translation, hey, we have all the resources and power, and everybody else should just be under our control, mindlessly working, being very happy. Another way of saying it is, you will own nothing and you will be happy. But unfortunately, it gets even worse. And I know I'm almost out of time here, but this is where things really start to get like borderline evil. So just stay with me here, especially when you start talking about what he did next with the General Education Board. So let's go to the third and final chapter. Okay, so around this era, it's pretty safe to say that at least half of America was practicing holistic and natural cures and medicine. But around 1900, scientists discovered petrochemicals and the ability to create all kinds of chemicals from oil itself. In fact, the first plastic known as Bakelite or Bakelite was made from oil in 1907. And on top of this, scientists were discovering that various vitamins and drugs could be made from these oils. And coincidentally, guess who owned the monopoly on oil? Yeah, this guy, John D. Rockefeller, who owned a whopping 90% of the entire oil industry at the time. Okay, so what did he do? Well, he teamed up with Andrew Carnegie, who also held the richest man in the world title at some point, and together they hired this guy right here, Abraham Flexner, who, by the way, wasn't even a doctor. He was an educator who sat very close to Rockefeller and Gates in the General Education Board. And he created what's now known as the Flexner Report, which, if you look that up in the official National Library of Medicine, it notes that this report changed the medical industry forever. But of course, the question is, well, what does all of this have to do with the education system and where we are today? Well, considering that Rockefeller pretty much had control over what was being taught in the now established public school system, and also considering a big chunk of his donations were to medical colleges, and on top of that, funded new collegiate schools to pop up, well, Rockefeller, Flexner, along with the rest of their group, started pushing for major reform in the medical curriculum across the board towards these new drugs being the new gold standard, while also demonizing natural and holistic cures that the human race has been using forever. And guess what? They were successful, as in the year 1910, the Flexner Report was submitted to Congress, in which they passed into law, and thus the big pharma industry that we all know and love was born. Okay. So our time is up, but obviously we've only begun to start on talking about how the modern education system came to be. So what I did is I posted all my sources in the description below for you guys to do your own independent research and figure out. And by the way, leave your thoughts in the comments below. What did you guys think about all this? I want to hear your thoughts as well. Now, if you guys want to see more content like this, whether it's the start of the Federal Reserve, how that began, or even the big pharma, let me know in the comment section as well. And of course, guys, like this video and share this video with as many people as you possibly can, because yeah, everyone needs to know about this. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.